Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 42. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I have a special guest with me today, Amy Gardner of Apochromatik. And I love this story, and I can't wait to introduce you to Amy because we met when we were both practicing law full-time. So I was at my firm, and Amy was at Skadden. And we were co-counsel on an IP litigation matter. And this is part of why you should always be nice and do good work and keep up with your contacts and network. Because when Amy and I were working on that case, neither one of us, to my knowledge, were thinking about starting our own companies or being coaches for lawyers or anything like that. So fast forward. And Amy reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to be in Nashville and I see you're doing coaching. Let's get together. And so we met and we traded notes. And then here we are on this podcast probably a year later. So Amy, like I said, she was an associate at Skadden for, I believe, about 5 years. And then she went to a more mid-sized firm in Chicago, became a partner there, and then became the dean of students at the University of Chicago before then moving into her own company and doing coaching for lawyers and law firms, as well as, I believe, non-lawyers and other organizations. So Amy knows the ins and outs of big law, of mid-sized law, and then, of course, she's worked with so many law students that she has a great feel for what kind of career is going to be a good fit and just understanding, how to navigate the politics of basically any and every type of organization from first year up to partner. So, Amy, welcome to Hustle and Flow.
Thank you. I'm grinning so much remembering our days in that case in Chattanooga, I think it was. So it's so great to reconnect with you and to be on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So today's episode, what we're talking about, the topic is performance reviews. And Amy has the series with some wonderful blog articles, and she agreed to come on and kind of give an overview of all of that for you here today. So let's just start with, perhaps it's obvious, Amy, but why should we even be focused on annual reviews? Do they even matter that much?
So they do matter generally. I think often they're kind of wedged in at the end of the year. You're trying to get out for the holidays. You have a lot of projects winding down, and oftentimes people don't give them the weight and importance that they really deserve. But usually there's a written review document that's going to go into your file long term. When I was at Skadden, they actually used to read comments from people's annual reviews at the party when they made partner. So you would hear things that had been written on somebody's review as a first year, second year associate. And it was always a funny time, but it was also a good reminder that those reviews hang out there forever.
I absolutely agree, Amy. So to me, when I was a practice group leader, sometimes I was shocked how associates would come in and not be prepared to discuss anything. They just thought it was another meeting, another day in the office, and they are really important. So let me ask you this. Who do you think should be focusing on this? Is it really just for associates, or should partners or in-house counsel, should others really be focusing on this as well?
Really, everybody should focus on their annual performance review. It's such a good opportunity to put your career trajectory on the mind of your supervisor, to show your investment in your career, and to reflect on really the place where you spend so much of your waking hours over the last year, and figure out where you want to go and what you need to do to get to the next level in your career. So really, if you care about your career, you should care about your performance review. All
right, so let's break it down. So some places, they have written plans, right? You have to come up with some kind of written plan each year, or there's something that's written in your review that then comes up again the following year. So let's say, this episode is coming out, I believe, around November 28th. So if someone has their review within the next month and they're like, oh no, I've not really done anything with my plan from last year. What advice do you have for them?
Well, it's not too late. First of all, you should look over last year's review and take action to address any lingering items that you can address. And you might be surprised at how many things you can still work on, or at least be able to say that you've made progress on them. You also want to make an accomplishment list. Look over the last year and reflect on the things that you've achieved. You may remember how many depositions you took, but you probably don't remember, without sitting down and thinking about it, how those depositions advanced your client's case. So you want to make an accomplishment list. You also want to look over this year's form, if you can, to see what items you're going to be evaluated on. You also want to think about your goals for next year, so that you walk into your review with a game plan of what things you think you need to do to improve on. So it's a two-way conversation. And then if there are any potential new items that, as you look at this year's form, you think, that could be a problem, you want to try to work on those. And you also want to prepare 5 to 6 bullet points that are kind of your talking points for your review, the things that you want to make sure that you convey. And those might be things like, in the last year, I've worked on being a better leader in managing my team. Or those might be things like, last year you said I needed to get more writing experience, and here's a list of all the briefs that I did. So it's not too late. Actually, one way that science may be on your side is that the recency effect means that we tend to overvalue recent things. So it would be ideal if every month you had been working all along on the items from last year's review, but what's done is done, and focus on what you can control and what you can improve on now, between now and your review.
Okay, so I like that. I just did an episode on how, don't give up at the end of the year. You can still make progress. So is there a way to identify, if you pull out the form or you pull out your plan, would you give certain areas priority over others, or would you just focus on where can you get easy wins within the next 30 days or however much time you have before your review?
I would focus on the items that you think are likely to be the weakest for you, to try to bring those up. And in addition, I would also really focus on the low-hanging fruit. So, for example, if you were told to get on a trial team and none of the cases in the office went to trial, well, there's nothing you can do about that. And you're not going to, come up with a case that's going to go to trial in the next 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. But what you can do is you can reach out to trial advocacy professors at the law schools nearby and ask if you could come in and speak, or legal ethics professors and ask if you could come in and speak about an issue that comes up in trials. Or you could sign up to go to a trial advocacy training or write an article on a particular topic. Some of those things, even signing up for a pro bono case that's likely to go to trial, all those things are ways that you won't be able to say, I got on a trial team, but you can say, I wasn't able to, and these are all the other things that I did to show my motivation, my commitment to achieving that goal.
I like that. And then you were talking about recency. So, if someone, maybe they said they were going to improve their motion writing skills, can you just kind of give an example of what that would look like when you're talking about recency?
Sure. So because of the recency effect, it means that the work that you did most recently is going to be overvalued in your supervisor's mind. So if you wrote 10 motions, they're going to remember the 10th one, the last one, and value that more highly than the first one, even though they should receive equal billing. So really putting in the effort at the end of the year to do the best work you possibly can is still going to pay off, even if it might have been better if all along you've been doing great work.
Mm-hmm. That actually brings up, so I know sometimes people don't even ask for feedback from supervisors. Would it be helpful at all if there was an area you're supposed to be working on? If you went to one of the partners you work with a lot or one of your supervisors and asked for feedback on that issue? Do you think that's similar to recency, Absolutely. That they would think you're focused on it?
Absolutely. And they might have some feedback that you can adopt pretty easily and then be able to cite that as a win or improvement. It's so silly that we're so reluctant to give feedback. And if you make it clear that you want feedback, it conveys that you're really interested in progressing and improving in your career and makes it easier for people to give you feedback that you need to hear. And you can act on that feedback. So you're far better off asking for feedback before your review and acting on it than waiting until the end of the year to take steps to improve.
I like it. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to follow up on, you said have 5 to 6 bullet points, some speaking points. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. So it can be tricky in your review to steer the conversation. There's a form, you're receiving feedback. But there are also points that you want to make sure that you convey. So for example, if you work for multiple partners or multiple supervisors, the person who's doing your review may not be aware of all of the achievements that you've had. And they may also not be fully aware of all the things that you've done. So coming in with a list of 5 to 6 bullet points of things like, last year you indicated I should get more motion practice. These are the motions that I argued in the last year. Or in the next year, I really want to improve on this area and that area to be able to grow in my career. Having that, being prepared in that way and having those bullet points prepared means that you're coming into it showing that you have reflected on your professional development over the last year and know that there are areas for you to improve on and that you're prepared for it. The worst thing that can happen, and well, one of the bad things that can happen in a review is if the supervisor says, so what are you most proud of from the last year? And you can't think of anything. So you want to go in prepared, and it'll help you feel more confident. Take in a folder with a notebook and a pen and your accomplishment list, as well as 5 to 6 bullet points that you want to make sure that you get out and convey in your review. And then at the end of the review, when the supervisor says, is there anything you wanted to add? Go back over those bullet points and make sure you've touched on them.
That reminds me, okay, so when I was an associate, our firm it was basically like this core competency list for the litigation group. And it basically said, here's what you should have done by this point. Well, I received that when I was a junior associate, and every year I would go in with that. And if I did not do what you're saying, which would have been a great idea, which is to say, I have done all of these things, I always went in it with, I've not done these things. And part of it's because I'm not getting the experience. So one year I go in, and because practice group leaders and supervisors change. Right. So, they may not even know what was discussed last year. So I love showing up and saying, here's what you said last year, even if it wasn't you, and here's what I did about it. But I show up one year and I'm like, I'm falling behind in these areas because I'm not getting an opportunity to have these experiences. And my practice group leaders at the time had never even seen that form.
Oh my God. Wow.
But they were blown away by it because they were like, wow, she's really proactive. So yes, I love this idea of the bullet points and showing up with what you've accomplished, especially if maybe, there's a changing of the guards because they don't always have access to the same information, even though you would think they do. Okay. So let's say that you have focused on your plan, right? You had a plan, you've been working on it, you've been doing good. So you might just be thinking, I don't have anything to worry about. I'm just going to go in there. My guess is you're going to say they need to prep as well. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of the same things. You want to go in confident. You want to dress up a little more than you normally do. Take in your notebook, take in your 5 to 6 bullet points, your list of accomplishments, and really take some time to reflect beforehand. Because if you walk in unprepared, something comes up that you hadn't anticipated, your reaction will not necessarily be the professional, calm response that you would have had if you had taken the time to prepare.
And what if your company or your firm does not have a form or a written plan, right? I mean, at that point, should they just be focusing on their list of accomplishments and bullet points regardless of the form or what happened last year? What would your recommendation be there?
So I would say that you want to go reflect over your notes from last year. You still want to have an accomplishment list so that you feel confident and prepared. You still want to have 5 to 6 bullet points. But I think in those situations, we really recommend that regardless of whether there's a form or not, your goal when you leave your review is to know what you need to do over the next year to reach the next level of your career. And that's even more important if there's not really a formal review process. And when you have that conversation with your supervisor, if there's not a form or any written documentation, we recommend that you send them an email or a memo that says, I'm trying to summarize our discussion and make sure that we're both on the same page in terms of the areas I should be focusing on in the next year to advance. And so you want to have some written agreement that it's not really a formal contract or anything, but you want to have something that shows this is where the supervisor and I both think I need to put most of my attention in the next year. That can be really helpful if your supervisor changes. And it's especially important if there's no form or other formal process at your employer.
That's a great idea. And I just love when people are proactive. So I would think that that's only going to come across as being a go-getter, not just that you're trying to document the conversation.
Right. And you can say, I want to make sure this is such an important conversation and my career is so important to me that I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Do you mind if I shoot you an email summarizing the areas that I think I need to work on? So that you can give the supervisor a heads up so that they don't feel like you're trying to trap them. But that way you have it to go back to, and it's going to help you down the road, and it's going to help them too down the road.
That is great. Okay, so we've talked about how you prepare for the review itself. What tips do you have for when you are in the review? I think you've actually given a few already. You said show up with a notebook that has your bullet points in there. Any other tips for when you're in the review?
Sure. I think the most important preparation that you can do for that time in the review is thinking through your mindset and how you're going to approach it. Everybody knows you shouldn't get defensive, but you have to go in prepared that you're going to hear some good feedback and you're going to hear some bad feedback, because frankly, it wouldn't be worth anybody's time if they were just going to give you a pat on the head, say, good job, here's your sticker, and send you out the door. You wouldn't want that anyway. And so go in assuming it's going to be a conversation about your opportunities for improvement and your strengths. And one of my favorite pieces of advice is if you feel like you might be getting defensive, or you're prone to get defensive when you get less than positive feedback, is to stay curious to avoid becoming furious. So in other words, isn't that great? So in other words, you just ask questions and approach it as though you're an anthropologist and you're just trying to gather information, and taking yourself out of it a little bit to just stay curious and try to understand can help you avoid becoming defensive and setting yourself back professionally.
That is great advice. So speaking of, sometimes people get really nervous even going into reviews like this. So I know you said be confident. Do you have any tips on what people can do beforehand to make sure that they are cool, calm, and confident and not, a big anxious mess?
Yeah, I think that one thing that really can help is making that list of accomplishments, because that helps you reflect on the good things that you've achieved over the last year. I think going over your bullet points, all of that preparation can help you feel more confident. You also want to make sure that on the day of your review, to the extent that it's scheduled in advance and all of that, you don't schedule a bunch of other things beforehand. There's a big difference between sprinting from one meeting into your review and having the half hour or so beforehand to run to the restroom, collect yourself, maybe even do some deep breathing, or just focus and center yourself, because it's an important conversation and you don't want to be running in late and sweaty and stressed out before it. And I think another thing too is to go into it with a mindset of this is a developmental conversation. So often I think attorneys we put so much of our self-worth into our grades in law school and then, getting the gold stars and winning cases and advancing up the ladder, that we can really put a lot of pressure on a review. And I think it is an important conversation, but remembering it's a developmental conversation and it's one step on your progression through your career can sometimes take some of that pressure off. And also remembering that you're going to be complimented. You're going to get positive feedback, and preparing yourself to receive those compliments graciously and not talking the reviewer out of complimenting you. I think all of those things can help your mindset and the way that you approach it.
And I think I read this in one of your blog articles. It totally resonated with me. We tend to focus on, once we're in the review, we tend to focus on what's the negative that's said to us as opposed to the positive. Mm. All we hear is, right, that one piece of criticism, and we're like, I suck.
Yeah. I gave an example that one time I had a review when I was at Skadden. I think it was my very first year, actually. And the person reviewing me wasn't the partner I normally worked for. And I just sat there taking notes, and I went back to my office and called my husband, sure that I was about to be fired. And he said, well, gosh, what happened? What did she say? And I read him my notes off my notebook, and there was exactly one piece of suggestion for improvement. And that was essentially, you're a junior associate. All junior associates need to work on their writing, work on your writing. And I had somehow interpreted that in the 50 feet from her office to my desk as get ready to get a pink slip and move into a cardboard box.
Right.
So taking notes during it and then reading them back to a neutral party can be very helpful as well.
All right. So assuming you make it through the review and you remember that there were positive things said as well as maybe some areas for improvement, what's next? Do you get a break for an entire year before you have to prep again, or are there other steps you should take?
Oh, if only we could just take a break, right? It can be so tempting to say, woo, made it through that one, or I did a great job. Isn't that wonderful? And then get back to the things on your desk. But instead, first you want to not discuss your review with your coworkers or reports, which can sound insane. But when you stop and think about it, how often has your buddy from down the hall come into your office and said, oh my God, what did they say to you? You really want to avoid that. And no good comes of it. You want to review the notes you took during your review and fill in any gaps. There's probably some things that you overlooked as you were scribbling. You also want to make a list of your goals for the next year. And it's important that that includes both the feedback you got during your review, but also your own goals for yourself. So it's really important that you leave that review knowing what you and your supervisor believe you need to do to advance to the next level in your career and to have agreement on that, as we talked about before. But also think about what other things do you want to try to achieve for yourself. And then once you have that list of goals for the next year, you really want to carve out a professional development plan for when and what and how you're going to achieve your goals over the next year. And that sounds like, must be complicated and take a lot of time, but it really doesn't. It's just a matter of scheduling the more tangible goals. Like if you want to write an article or speak at a conference, you want to schedule those into the months when you're going to work on them and set aside time now when the next year is more of a blank slate. And then for things that are harder to measure, so for example, if you're told you need to work on building stronger client relationships or things like that, you want to schedule reminders of those into your calendar now. And then last, you want to schedule time each week to review your list of goals. And then we talked before about that list of accomplishments, and it's hard to go back over the last 12 months to make that. So next year, you're going to make it easier on yourself. Schedule time at least monthly to add to your accomplishments list. So as you're doing that, you're setting yourself up basically for the next year, and it's going to pay off for you down the road. You might also want to consider if you want to set up another review or at least conversation with your supervisor, whether that's formal or more informal, asking for more feedback as you go along, because that can be a good way to show that you're making progress and acting on the feedback. Mm-hmm. Because really, if you just view your performance review as an hour or half hour out of the year, you're really missing the value in it and really missing a huge opportunity to advance in your career.
That is great advice. And for the listeners that follow my system of actually planning every week and month and quarter, this is a great thing to add in there, not just to be paying attention to whether or not you're making progress towards your goals, but keeping track of your accomplishments. I love that idea, Amy. I mean, one, it makes it easier, but two, if you're in the habit of documenting that, you're going to actually pay more attention to your goals because of it, because it's going to make you feel good when you see that.
Absolutely. It also makes it easier if you're thinking about why you do what you do to see the results you're achieving. And also, if you do end up updating your resume, updating your bio for speaking engagements, things like that, it's so much easier if you have that accomplishment list running along and, a note in your phone or a Word document or wherever. It doesn't have to be fancy.
That is such a great idea. I love it. Okay, so it might be a little late, but maybe not, for those that are wanting to prep for their review. But I'm guessing that if someone actually wanted to do prep interviews or work on preparing their plan or their goals for professional development, that is something that you could help them with. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we coach attorneys and other professionals on all aspects of their careers. And it's definitely something that we can work with people on, figuring out a strategy for addressing areas for improvement, figuring out how to prepare for a performance review, figure out how to process and act on feedback. Those are all things that we're happy to work with people on.
And so if someone is interested in working with you or reaching out, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
They can visit our website, which is apochromatik.com. It's going to be in the show notes, but it's APOCHROMATIK.com, or they can email amy@apochromatik.com. And for the listeners of your podcast, actually, if they go to apochromatik.com and sign up to join our email list, there's a spot where you can put a message in when you sign up. If they put in hustle in the message line, then they'll receive our free booklet on how to ace your performance reviews. And we'll send that to them via email. So they'll have that resource.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. Definitely go grab a copy of that. This has been, one, it's just been really good. The content is great. But two, honestly, Amy, I've just really enjoyed having this experience.
So great to talk with you.
On the coaching side, it feels very much like a full circle moment.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? Yeah. This, friends, is why you keep up with people. And you look them up when you happen to be in a city, you check on LinkedIn and see who you know in that city, because you never know who may have moved there in the meantime or where life is going to take folks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for being on the episode. For those of you that are now interested in figuring out how to come up with your 2018 plan, both for your career and your life, definitely check out the Life and Law Plan workshop that I am hosting on December 20th. It is virtual, so you can stay in your jammies all day long if you prefer. And there is a recording available through January 10th if you're not available on December 20th. Spots are limited, however, because I want to be able to answer everyone's questions that are on the webinar. So again, it's a full day workshop. We will be working through your life and law plan for 2018. I'll give you all the templates, guides, teach you, and also give you breaks to begin implementing so that at the end of the day, you have a fully mapped out plan and you know exactly how you're going to accomplish it with a schedule in place. So if you're interested in joining, all you have to do is go to heatherjoyhubbard.com/2018 plan. heatherjoyhubbard.com/2018 plan. We'll put that in the show notes for you as well. And don't forget to go grab your free performance evaluation ebook from Amy over at her website. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.